Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Yoga Break It Down. In this episode, we are going to explore pyramid pose. This is a great leg stretch. For this exercise, we will need blocks, 2. I also recommend you try this exercise at a table as I'm going to demonstrate first. So standing in front of the table a good distance away so that it looks like a reach for your arms. You would start with your feet parallel and then take one foot and just step it a normal step forward. So not a long step forward, just a normal step forward. So maybe you end up with approximately 6 inches between the line of the front set of toes and the line of the heel of the forward foot. It might be even a smaller distance between them. The feet are still hip distance apart as they were when you were first standing in front of the table. It's just now that one foot is forward, meaning we're not trying to line up one foot behind the other. They are still hip distance apart, one forward from the other. Start to sink the ball and the heel of each foot down into the floor. The toes are relaxed or actively spread out. You're going to start to lengthen from each heel up through the back of the legs. And when you reach the sits bones, they're going to tilt up. As you can see, I take my thumbs or other fingers to the top of my quads and give a little push back to help this extension. So when I'm tuning into the back of the legs, I'm thinking of that extension up, but then the focus of the hips and the front of the legs is to extend back. As the sits bones raise up and the hips move back, the torso starts to lower. When the table is in reach, place both hands on top of the tabletop. And so the palms are just facing down, they're not holding on to the table, and you're not bending in the wrists. Depending on how close or far away you started from the table will depend on how the hands are in contact with the table. So if you wound up being a little close, you might be resting your palms or even your forearms on the table, and that's fine. Just work on extending those arms forward so you can feel more of that elongation throughout the torso. If you ended up a bit further away from the table, you may even find that you're just barely touching the table with your fingertips. And that's a very nice distance away because it helps you to continue that elongation through the upper body forward. Once you've made contact with the table, tuning into the torso and the hips, you want to feel the hips continue to extend back. You also want to watch out for the alignment of the hips. They should be square and extending back together. So sometimes the hip of the leg of the foot that is forward starts to move further forward as well, but we want those hips to be in line and to draw back. You're also going to feel an elongation through the spine, up the spine, out through the top of the head. As you're extending in those two directions, then let the torso in one nice straight line sort of drop a little bit. So that's different from allowing the midsection to bow. You want to keep the extensions in two directions so that you maintain more of a taut frame, and then you let it drop. Going from your upright position to the lowered torso position greatly increases the stretch in the legs. So if it feels like too much, you can maintain a slight bend in both knees. A bend in the knees is also recommended if you find that your spine is rounded as you're extending forward. When we bend in the knees, it allows the pelvis to tilt up a little bit more, the sits bones to raise up a little bit more, which brings the spine down. Any rounded part of the spine, it drops it down a little bit. We're going to tune into the belly and the sits bones. We're now going to allow the belly to relax and drop down, And that should feel like it's inspiring the sits bones to raise up, but you can also draw intention to that area and lift the sits bones a little bit more. So that's going to increase the length in the back of the upper part of the leg. It's going to allow the belly to drop down more. In forward folds, if anything is going to come in contact with the legs first, it would be the belly to the quads. Once allowing the belly to drop and the sits bones to lift, tune back into the hips, make sure they're square, and continue to allow them to extend back. Whenever arms are overhead, so we're still saying arms are overhead even though the torso and arms are parallel to the floor, arms overhead really opens the lungs and inspires nice, slow, deep breaths. So take your time with your breathing, breathing into all of the corners of the lungs. When you feel it is time to come out of the pose on this side, really cautiously come up. Sometimes I place my hands on my hips or my lower back to help guide the torso upright. And we are working on balance as we come up from this position. And then bringing the forward foot back, you would then go on to the other side, bringing the foot that was back now forward. Now we're going to practice pyramid using blocks instead of the table. For this position, we would start out standing with our feet hip distance apart and set up the blocks just a little bit in front of you as I'm demonstrating at their highest height, regardless of your perceived flexibility. Very similar to the table, the blocks are definitely lower, but because of the length of the arms, it will just feel slightly deeper. As before, we're stepping one foot forward. The foot will probably line up in between the blocks, but don't worry about moving the blocks around right now. Gaining your balance, you're standing on the 2 feet, slightly shifted. You're going to sink down through the feet, stretch up through the backs of the legs, bending the knees if needed, squaring the hips and drawing the hips back, feeling the sits bones raise up and the torso start to come down. Let the arms dangle, and as soon as the blocks are in reach of just a couple of your fingers, let them touch. If you feel like the blocks are too far out or too close, adjust them. We want to have the blocks underneath the shoulders so that the wrists can wind up underneath our shoulders. Square the hips, have them extend back. Feel the elongation through the spine, vertebrae by vertebrae, out through the top of the head. Relax the shoulders. Start to focus on the extension of the upper legs. So again, it doesn't matter if the knees are bent or straight. We're going to extend up through the sits bones. Allow the belly to drop. Maybe the belly will touch the upper leg of the leg that's forward. Allow the torso to sink a little bit more deeply. And then checking in with the arms. You may have gone from touching with the fingertips to touching with the palms or the fists. Maybe you're still at the fingertips. Now let's check in with the arms. See if you can bend slightly or significantly in the elbows. That's going to lower the torso even a little bit more. If you are touching the blocks with the fists or the hands, you probably feel the belly against the quad. Make sure you keep the spine in line. We don't want to start diving forward with the nose and just trying to reach the leg or the knee with the nose. Keep the spine in line every step of the way. Just feel the belly relax a little bit more, and it'll slowly start to relax your midsection area. If you feel that the elbows have bent significantly, you can adjust the blocks so that they're the middle height or the lower height. Tune into the hips. We want to keep them square, extending back. Heel and ball of the foot sinking down evenly into the floor as you stretch up through the back of the legs, raising the sits bones. So you may have lowered the torso lower than when you were practicing at the table. This is going to produce a deeper stretch. Take your time. You may do one adjustment, think you're done there, and then as you sink into it a little bit more, want to go just a little bit further and spend some time there. You can work to eventually touching the floor instead of using blocks. If you do get to that stage, then likely your chest will also be in contact with that forward leg, and then maybe the nose to part of the leg as well. Particularly if you go deeper into this pose, you will feel significant stretch throughout the spine as well as the legs. Continue to lift the sits bones up, drop the torso so that particularly the lower back stays in line and does not round very much. Since you've likely gone deeper in this variation, definitely tune into the contact of the ball and the heel of each foot to the floor. Place your hands on the hips or the lower back if needed to sense your alignment before gracefully lifting the torso all the way upright. Continue with your balance and grace as you step that forward foot back. Take a moment to make sure you're balanced before stepping the alternate foot forward. Thank you guys for joining me for this episode of Yoga Break It Down. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and share this video with friends. Remember that everybody needs yoga. So that means Annie Grace needs yoga, translators need yoga, court reporters, they need yoga, and you especially, baby, you need some yoga too. So I really hope you join me next time on Yoga Break It Down. Bye-bye.